You have to understand, my camera wasn't just a job. It was more like an extra limb, an extension of my eye. My name is Jake, and for the better part of a decade, I was a street photographer in New York City. And I was good at it. Not famous good, not gallery good, but I had a knack for it. A knack for capturing what the French photographers called l'instant décisif, the decisive moment. That split second of raw, unstaged life when a person's guard is down and you see something real. A laugh, a look of despair on the subway, a couple arguing, a kid seeing a skyscraper for the first time. The city is a giant, breathing organism, and I was documenting its pulse. This all happened back in the summer of 2019. It was one of those oppressive New York summers. The kind where the air is so thick with humidity it feels like you're breathing water. And the asphalt gives off a shimmering heat haze. The city smells different in that kind of heat, a potent cocktail of roasted peanuts, street vendor hot dogs, garbage that's been cooking on the curb, and a million people's perfume and sweat all mixed together. For me, that was the smell of home. I'd spend 12, sometimes 14 hours a day just walking. From the chaotic, sensory overload of Chinatown to the quiet, tree-lined streets of the West Village. Just walking and watching. My old Fujifilm X-T3 cool and solid in my hand. The whole thing started, as most unsettling things do, in the most ordinary way imaginable. It was a Tuesday night. I was back in my small apartment in Astoria. The hum of the air conditioner a welcome reprieve from the day's heat. I was doing what I did every few nights, dumping the contents of my SD cards onto my hard drive and beginning the long, meditative process of sifting through hundreds of photos, looking for the keepers. I was culling a batch from the week before, mostly shots taken around Pell Street in Chinatown. I had this one image of an old woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, selecting vegetables from an outdoor stall. It was a good shot, but my focus was a little soft. As I was about to mark it for deletion, something in the background caught my eye. Across the crowded street, partially obscured by a hanging roasted duck, was a man. He was just another face in the crowd. Blurry, insignificant, but there was something vaguely familiar about the set of his shoulders. I shrugged it off. In a city of 8 million people, you're bound to see faces that remind you of someone. I deleted the photo and thought nothing more of it. That was the first time. The first, tiny, innocuous red flag that I didn't even recognize as a flag. About a week later, I was going through another set. This one was from a long walk I'd taken through Central Park. I had a fantastic series of a young guy breakdancing near the Bethesda fountain, and I was editing them for my portfolio. One of the shots was a wider angle, capturing the crowd of onlookers. And there, on a bench in the background, sitting under the shade of a large oak tree, was a man. He was too far away to see clearly, but he was wearing the same dark jacket as the man in the Chinatown photo. A bit weird for a hot summer day, but not unheard of. This time, he seemed to be looking in my general direction. A little prickle of unease went down my spine. The kind you get when you think someone's talking about you. I zoomed in as much as the resolution would allow. The face was just a pixelated mess. Weird, I muttered to the empty room. It had to be a coincidence. People own similar jackets. Still, I didn't delete that photo. I moved it into a separate folder I cryptically named Misc. I didn't know why. It was just a feeling. The story could have, and probably should have, ended there. Two weirdly similar appearances in a city of millions. It's a statistical anomaly, nothing more. My brain, the logical part of it, was already telling me to let it go. But the part of me that makes me a photographer, the part that looks for patterns and connections where others don't, couldn't shake it. The real turning point, the moment this went from a strange coincidence to something else entirely, came a month later. I'd spent an afternoon shooting down in the subway, trying to capture the transient loneliness of the platforms. That night, fueled by cheap coffee, I loaded the new photos. I was clicking through them, the blur of an express train, a musician playing a saxophone, a tired woman leaning her head against the window, and then I froze. It was a shot of the G train platform at Hoyt-Schermerhorn, taken from my position on the opposite side, and there he was, standing directly across the tracks from me. This time, there was no crowd to hide in. He was standing alone, bathed in the harsh, flickering fluorescent light, and the light caught his face. My breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't just a man who looked like me. It was me. I'm not talking about a passing resemblance. I'm talking about a perfect, one-to-one copy. The same slightly crooked nose from when I broke it in high school. The same small, crescent-shaped scar on my chin from falling off my bike as a kid. The same hairline that I was just starting to get self-conscious about. It was my face, staring back at me from across a subway platform I'd been on just hours before. But his expression, it was blank, utterly, unnervingly devoid of any emotion. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking through it. He was looking at me. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands started to shake. I leaned in close to the monitor, my nose almost touching the screen, tracing the pixels with my eyes. The EXIF data, the metadata embedded in every digital photo, was clear as day. Fujifilm X-T3, 56mm lens, f1.8, ISO 1600, date and time, September 12, 2019, 4:32 p.m. It was all correct. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a mistake. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. A long-lost twin brother? I was an only child. A prank? Who would go to such lengths? Stalking me for weeks, maybe months, just to appear in the background of my photos? It made no sense. I jumped up from my chair and paced my small apartment, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to check the locks on my door. I did, twice. From that moment on, everything changed. My passion became my source of terror. I became obsessed. I spent the next 2 days, barely sleeping, barely eating, digging through my entire digital archive. Years of photos, tens of thousands of images. I ran a facial recognition software I had, feeding it the cropped image from the subway photo. The results came back, and my blood ran cold. He was there, dozens of times, spanning back almost 2 years. A photo from a street festival in Bushwick a year ago, he was a face in the crowd. A shot of the Flatiron Building from 18 months back, he was a tiny figure walking on the other side of the street. A photo of a snowstorm in Brooklyn 2 winters ago, he was a silhouette under a distant street lamp. Always distant, always in the background, but as I arranged the photos chronologically, a horrifying pattern emerged. He was getting closer. In the older photos, he was a speck, an anonymous figure you'd never notice unless you were specifically looking for him. Then, he was across the street. Then, on a park bench. Then, on the opposite subway platform. The distance was closing with each new sighting. He wasn't just randomly appearing. He was converging on me. I had to tell someone. I called my best friend, Sarah. I tried to explain it, my voice trembling over the phone. I sent her the pictures. She was patient, but I could hear the skepticism in her voice. Jake, this is really weird, she said, carefully. But are you sure it's not some kind of weird viral marketing thing? Or maybe you're just stressed. You've been working too hard. Sarah, it's my face. It's my scar. It could be a digital manipulation. Someone could have hacked your computer. Or it could just be a guy who looks a lot like you. A doppelganger. She said the word, doppelganger, and a primal fear, something ancient and cold, gripped me. The old legends say that to see your own doppelganger is an omen of death. Sarah's disbelief was worse than seeing the photos. It made me feel like I was going insane. It pushed me onto an island of my own terror. I stopped going outside. My camera sat on its shelf, gathering dust. The city, my playground, now felt like a cage. And I knew the tiger was somewhere inside it with me. I kept my blinds closed. Every time I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment, my body would go rigid. I'd sit in the silence of my room, just listening to the hum of the refrigerator, straining to hear anything out of the ordinary. The fear was constant. It was a low-frequency hum beneath the surface of everything. I was no longer a photographer. I was prey. After about a week of this self-imposed prison, I ran out of food. I had to go out. My stomach was churning with anxiety. But I knew I couldn't hide forever. I decided to go late at night. To the 24-hour bodega on the corner. Fewer people, fewer faces. I grabbed a hoodie, pulled the hood up low over my eyes, and slipped out of my building. The night air was cool. The street was quiet. bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights. I bought what I needed: milk, bread, a can of soup, my eyes darting around the whole time. The clerk gave me a weird look. I probably looked like I was about to rob the place. The walk back was only 2 blocks. But it felt like miles. The street was empty, my sneakers scuffed against the pavement, the sound echoing in the silence. And then I heard it. Another set of footsteps. They were behind me, maybe half a block away. I told myself it was nothing. Just someone else out for a late night walk. But they were perfectly in sync with mine. When I sped up slightly, they sped up. When I slowed, they slowed. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. This was it, the final convergence. I knew, with a certainty that defied all logic. Who was behind me? I was about 50 feet from my apartment building. I couldn't lead him there. I couldn't let him know where I lived. In a split second of pure animal panic, I veered right and ducked into a narrow alleyway between my building and the next one. It was dark, choked with the smell of wet garbage and stale beer. I pressed myself behind a large, foul-smelling dumpster, trying to control my breathing, terrified he would hear the frantic gasps of air I was taking in. The footsteps stopped right at the entrance to the alley. A silhouette stood there, black against the orange glow of the street. I couldn't see a face. I couldn't see any details. Just a human shape. It stood perfectly still. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It just stood there, watching the darkness where I was hiding. Time seemed to stop. My entire world shrank to the space of that alley, to the sound of my own blood roaring in my ears, to the silent figure at the entrance. It felt like an eternity. Maybe it was only 30 seconds. I thought I was going to die. I thought he was going to walk into the alley and I would finally see his face up close. And that would be the last thing I ever saw. Then, as slowly and deliberately as it had appeared, the figure turned and walked away. The footsteps faded back into the ambient noise of the city until they were gone. I stayed hidden behind that dumpster for nearly an hour, shaking uncontrollably, before I finally found the strength to sprint the last few feet to my building's front door. I broke my lease the next week. I packed 2 suitcases, sold my camera and all my lenses for a fraction of what they were worth. And I left New York. I moved to a small, quiet town in Oregon where the faces are few and far between. I never saw him again. Not in a photograph, not on the street. I tried to tell myself it was a product of stress, an elaborate hallucination brought on by exhaustion and loneliness, a trick of the light. But I know what I saw. And the fear never really goes away. It's a permanent part of me now. I don't let people take my picture. I don't own a camera. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm walking down a quiet street, I'll catch my own reflection in a dark storefront window. And just for a split second, I don't see my own face looking back. I see his. That blank, empty, emotionless stare. And in the reflection, just for a moment, I think I see him smile.